Salam, everyone. Welcome to the uMentor Talk Show. We're so happy you could join us today. Before we start, we just wanted to put in a word about our new platform, uMentor Inspire. It's a question and answer platform for career advice in our Shia community. As a rising professional, you can ask for great advice from professionals in our community, especially our talk show panelists every week. As a mentor, you can give advice to our community's future professionals, and it's available on the Umoja app on Android and iOS. Today's speaker is Dr. Imran Khan, an accomplished scientist, clinical pharmacist, youth director, and foodie. He grew up in small-town Arkansas, but maintained his faith and culture, even though his family was the only Muslim family in his city. He serves as a corporate clinical pharmacist with Northwestern Medicine, and currently he lives in Chicago, Illinois. So let's welcome Dr. Khan. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Khan. So happy you could join us today. How are you?
Hey, wa alaikum salam. As you know, that there's a lot of history going on in the world today, right?
Right, yeah.
Well, it seems like we're going to have a historic moment today, too, in the show, two Imrans.
Yes. So much history being made today. Okay, so you're a clinical pharmacist, and I'm thinking when people hear that, they might be confused as to what are the different types of pharmacists and how a clinical pharmacist is different. So if you could just maybe start with that.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. It's a question that I receive quite a bit. When they first hear that I'm a pharmacist, instantly the first thing they think of is the retail pharmacy setting, your typical Walgreens or CVS pharmacist. But with a Doctorate of Pharmacy degree, you can actually go into 150 different avenues of medicine. And so one of the avenues that I went through to is a clinical pharmacist, a hospital-based clinical pharmacist. And so what does a hospital pharmacist do? Well, I actually have a little bit more clinical training. I did a residency here in Chicago. And based on that, now I was actually working at Northwestern Medicine in the hospital alongside physicians, and we would go and we would see patients, literally just like how physicians would go room to room, and I would be alongside with them. And what I would do is my responsibility was to create a medication plan and implement that specifically for that patient. So based on whatever disease state that patient has, I would have to come up with a drug regimen that was appropriate for dose, make sure that any of the adverse effects don't exacerbate their disease state, making sure that there's no drug interactions with their other medications that they were on, and basically try to solve health problems using the rational use of medications. That's kind of like the broad version of exactly what I did. Of course, once we implemented that medication plan, it was my job to follow that patient's progress to determine if the effects of the medications on the health were positive or negative, and adjust the medications based on how the patient was progressing.
I see. Okay. So I was intrigued personally, and I'm sure a lot of people were, in your bio when you said that you transitioned from a NASA researcher to a corporate clinical pharmacist. So how did that transition happen, and why pharmacy?
Yeah. Okay. Good question. I wish that I can come up here and tell you a wonderful story of how I wanted to do pharmacy all my life. But the fact is, if you want the truth, I never had any desire to go into pharmacy. My plan is that when I was at Arkansas State University, I was a chemistry major, and that university had just received a grant from NASA, and that grant was that NASA was interested in the chemical deposition of a material that was called cadmium sulfide to make photovoltaic cells. So essentially, to kind of break that down, what does that mean is they were interested in cadmium sulfide, this material which actually takes solar energy and it converts it into mechanical energy. And
Mhm.
why was NASA so interested in this? Well, it's because if they could find a cheap way of creating this material, then they would coat their spacesuits, the space shuttles, all with cadmium sulfide. They essentially have a
Right.
swimming pool full of cadmium sulfide and start just dipping everything into it and coating it,
Mhm.
so that once they go into space, that they would use less rocket fuel and more solar energy. And so that was, and I did that for 2 years and I loved it. Just
Mhm.
being part of NASA, and I probably had more publications after I left as a graduating senior than probably most of the faculty there at that university.
Wow.
And to be honest with you, that's all I wanted to do. My senior year,
Right.
I had a job lined up as a research scientist, and that was my plan. But um, one day, I was actually going to the library to study for a final. I still remember it was a Friday, and for a Monday's final. I know.
Studying on a Friday night.
I'm sorry. So, but yeah, I was actually going there, and I met this one of my classmates, and I had actually met her only once before, since I was president
Mhm.
of the American Chemical Society. She had came to that group meeting just once, and when I saw her again, I said, "Hey, I remember you. You came to one of our meetings." I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, I'm studying for this pharmacy test. It's called a PCAT." And I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, okay." And she said, "You're really good at pharmacy and chemistry, and so
But
why don't
had you taken like a pharmacy course yet at all up to that point?
never?" It was
No, never.
only
So
chemistry.
totally new.
Exactly.
Wow.
So when
Uh-huh.
she said that, the last test of the year is tomorrow, so why don't you think about taking it as a standby? And I said, you know what? No, I want to be a researcher. And so
Wow.
I still remember on the drive home, I was thinking about it. I said, well, it doesn't hurt. So why not?
Mhm.
I go and I got a money order made for that. In the
Right.
morning at 8 in the morning, I showed up. They had one cancellation, and so once I showed up, and I came in, I sat right behind her, and I still remember, she was very rude to me, and I said, "Hey, I took your advice. I'm here. Why are you mad?" And she said, "Well, because you're going to take my spot in pharmacy school." And it turned out that the day I found out, I
Mm.
saw her again, and I said, "Hey, I got in. What about you?" And she said, "No, told
So
you
you
you'd
took
take
her
my spot."
spot in pharmacy school.
I don't. I wouldn't like. I mean, there were 90 spots, so
Uh-huh.
I
I
don't.
see. Okay.
I didn't want to say that I'm the one who took her spot, but
Mhm.
that's kind of like how it worked out. And uh, when I received my scores, I took it to the advisor, and he said, it's so encrypted. I don't understand. Is this good or bad? And he said,
Yeah.
"You're going to pharmacy school, buddy."
So how long do people normally study for this exam?
Well, she told me that she studied 6 months for it.
Wow.
And so that's why I told her, I said, "Well, I'm not going to take your spot. You've been
Mhm.
studying for this for 6 months. I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't even know what's on this exam. I'm just taking it for fun." And it turned out that door opened up,
Hmm.
and I received an interview call from the University of Arkansas, and here it is. I have to go down there and convince this interviewer that this is what I wanted to do all my life. How
Even though
do I
you
do that?
just by chance, I mean, lucked into it, I guess.
And that door
Mhm.
opened up, and I just walked into it, and I said,
Right.
"Well, let's see where this is going." And we talked for 5 minutes.
Mhm.
He asked me like 4 questions, and I said, "That's it?" He goes, "Well, these are the questions that they gave me, and that's it." And I mean, "Is there anything else that you want to tell me about yourself?" And I said, "Wow, I have to say something, because he is not going to give me a
Right.
glowing recommendation after 4 minutes." And so I said, "Well, I just want to throw out there that I've been doing research for NASA for 2 years." And he said, "What?" He goes, "Do you know who I am?" I said, "No, who are you?" He said, "I'm the director of research here at this pharmacy school." And after that, we spoke for the next 45 minutes on research.
Hmm.
So that was kind of like my into pharmacy school.
So never cut yourself short. I mean, at least that's what you told me yesterday.
That's it.
Yeah.
If there's anything about yourself, don't be humble. Sell yourself. Because if you're not going to sell yourself, no one else will.
Mhm. So what does pharmacy school entail before we get into your residency?
Right. So it's currently there. The bare minimum is 2 years of undergraduate work, and then you can actually go straight to pharmacy school from there,
Mm-hmm.
assuming that you take the PCAT and then you fulfill all the requirements. However, a lot of the schools are now pushing for a 4-year undergraduate degree.
I see. Okay.
So some schools have already transitioned into that. Some schools, it's still the only requirement is a 2-year undergraduate work.
Mm-hmm.
So once you once you complete those 2 years, you can go straight to get a doctorate of pharmacy, and that's 4 years of work. And I always tell some of the students, I said, if you really want to become a physician, this is probably the best route that you can get. Go and get a strong foundation in pharmacy. Most of the students, they would take a 4-year undergraduate degree and
Right.
then go to 4 years of medical school, and that's 8 years. Well,
Mm-hmm.
for 2 more years, you'll get another degree, and that's a doctorate of pharmacy, and then you look like a more competitive applicant applying into medical school.
Yeah, that's interesting advice. So you would say like go even further than after you do pharmacy school. Then if you want, you can even apply to med school.
And you can apply to medical school. Most pharmacists, after they graduate from pharmacy school, they have the option of doing a 1 or 2 year residency. It's not required, but the way I looked at it is, well, I'm already poor, being the pharmacy student.
Uh-huh.
So what's another year or two of being poor? So
Interesting.
I just went straight, and it was very valuable, as a from a professional and personal growth going through a residency program.
And so, like, where was your residency, and what did it consist of?
Right. So my residency program was here in Chicago, and that's actually the avenue that actually opened up for me to come here
Mm-hmm.
to Chicago. So as I was looking for residency programs and I applied at different institutions, at Lutheran General Hospital, which is a hospital here in Chicago, I came up here and did my residency program. And believe me, after I was done with my residency program, I hated Chicago. I said that I miss my family, I miss my
Uh-huh.
friends. It's too cold here.
Mm-hmm.
People are really mean here. I said I want to go back home. And literally, the day that I graduated from residency, I packed everything up and I went straight home. And I stayed there for about a month. And I said, I miss Chicago.
And then came
Here
back.
it is. I packed everything back up and I came and I started working as a clinical pharmacist at one of Northwestern Medicine's hospitals. I stayed there for 14 years, and I started 5 pharmacy services at that hospital. And
Mm-hmm.
essentially, probably the one thing one piece of advice I can give people that I feel like led to my success was that whenever my director would come in and would offer that we want to start this service, everybody else would say, that's a little too hard. I don't think I want to do that. I was the only one that would say yes. And that built trust and relationship with my director
Right.
and the other presidents and trustees within the organization and hospital. And because of that, they took notice, and I was offered a administrative position in the corporate office of Northwestern Medicine. Essentially, it was a promotion,
Mm-hmm.
and they said that we've been watching you for the last 3 years. Seems kind of stalkerish, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. We've been
they
watching.
said that we've been watching you and the great work that you've been doing. So we want to offer you this position, and
Right.
and I jumped on it, and it's been great. I've been in this role for a little over a year now.
So what do you do in your new role? So your new role is corporate clinical pharmacist, right?
Yes, I'm a
Okay.
corporate-based clinical pharmacist. Correct.
Mm.
So in this role, it's another side of pharmacy that I wasn't really aware of. But
Mm-hmm.
essentially, what we do is we work with the other hospitals of Northwestern Medicine, and we look at a lot of their quality measures and see where some of the deficiencies in these clinics or these hospitals, and we try to work with them to try to get their numbers up. The other thing that they've asked me to do is Northwestern Medicine doesn't really have like an outpatient ambulatory pharmacy program, so I've been very instrumental in helping them start that up, since they've seen that I've started other services at the hospital before. And now they say that, well, based on that track record and your clinical knowledge and experience, we think that you would be perfect to start this program here. And it's been an overwhelming success so far.
Interesting. So I guess going back to your background, I was also intrigued in another part of your story. You said you moved from Toronto to a small town in Arkansas when you were 5, but despite that, you kept your religion and your culture. So I'm just wondering, how?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder that myself. Like you said, at the age of 5, my family and we moved from Toronto, and everybody who's been to Toronto knows how diverse Toronto is. And we went, and my father was actually working 3 jobs at Toronto, and my mom was like, you're not gonna be able to keep this up. We need to do something. We need to reevaluate. And so somebody actually gave my father a tip, and they said, there is a small hotel business in this state called Arkansas. Would you be interested? And, of course, they didn't know anything about it. And they just looked at it as an opportunity, and they said, all right, let's go. So here it is. We drove 16 hours from Toronto to this small town in Arkansas. And it's about, at that time, it was only 10,000 people. Huh. And something interesting about that town is that it was the KKK capital of the Mid-South in the 70s. Wow. So, if people don't know about KKK, it's a, very racial-based organization. And if you think about the cities in the Mid-South, you've got big cities like Dallas and Atlanta and New Orleans, and it's small town of 10,000 in Arkansas, and they are the KKK capital. Well, once we arrived in the 80s, in there, they put a headliner in the front page. It's my parents and myself, and I'm an only child, so it was only me. And it said, the first non-whites to move to Paragould, Arkansas, since the 70s. And at that time, we thought, wow, what a great way to welcome us. What a great way to, that they're really celebrating how progressive they are, and they're moving into, in this right direction. And in hindsight, I think about it, and I thought that, that could be a target. That could have been like an announcement to everybody to say, hey,
they're here.
They're here. Do something about it. But my father was very tactful in what he did, and he made friends with the law enforcement. He made friends with the alderman and the mayor. And so whenever there were issues, and I don't want to say that there weren't any issues, there were issues. Whenever there was, we were very fortunate that we had the support of the town, the city, to protect us. So that's kind of gives you a little bit of background on how I arrived in this small town, and I did my schooling. I graduated from there, and it was great.
Huh. Interesting. And so were they like openly hostile to you? Because I mean, seeing that they were the KKK capital of the world, and also, did they know right away that you're Muslim?
Well, yeah. So the town was 10,000 people, and to give you a kind of a demographic breakdown, it was 99.9% white. 0.1, my family. we broke the trend there. And what? As a kindergartner, and I graduated with the same set of friends. It was very interesting because one thing that I quickly learned is that racism is not like no one's born a racist. It's something that's taught. And as a kid, as a kindergartner, a lot of these kids were first exposed to someone like me, and they knew that I was Muslim. As a matter of fact, one of my childhood friends, who he still tells this story, he went home and he told his mom. He said, "Mom, I made a new friend at school," and she said, "Oh, that's great." Because he's not really like me. She said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, he's mushroom."
Mushroom.
Mushroom. What he meant to say was Muslim, but he didn't really know how to say that. So, but he still tells that story. And for the most part, a lot of the kids, they knew me and they saw me without color. They saw me as one of their own. He loves to play sports. He loves to play video games. He talks like us. He jokes like us. For all they know, that I was one of them.
Right.
And the part that I kind of talked about earlier about how I felt like racism is taught, and that's only based on my experience. I can tell you about a student who came up to me, and this was like close to like this was in high school. He came up to me and he said, "I hate you," and I said, and this is the first time I've ever met him, and I said, "Well, you hate me? Why do you hate me? What did I do to you?"
Yeah.
He said, "Well, because my daddy told me that I'm supposed to hate people like you." And I said, "Well, let's do this. At lunch today, we'll meet in the cafeteria and let's have lunch together. And then you get to know me. After you get a chance to know me, if you still hate me, then I'll just stay away and I'll never, we'll never cross paths ever again." And so he said, "Okay, that sounds fair." And so one day he came and, we had lunch together and we talked and we joked. And then the next day he came back and and we became the best of friends by the time we graduated. And we still keep in touch to this day. And he actually told me one day, he said that, "Hey, I'm having kids and I really it would mean a lot to me that if you would be the godfather of my kids." And I was like, "No way, man. I know you're going to leave those kids to me." So, but that kind of shows you how just through patience and conversation, how you can change someone's attitude rather than becoming defensive and hostile. And that's something I learned at a very early age.
Interesting. And I think it takes so much courage for you to say, instead of saying "I hate you" back to him, or just walking away, or saying "Come have lunch with me,"
Yeah, and he actually told me, he said, "What you did for me, I want you to do that for my parents." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "I want you to come back to my house and spend the night with me." And I said, "Oh," I said,
Wow.
I don't think that you're going to. I don't think I'll come out of there alive." And for the most part, I went there, and and it was fine. And it was very tense. And as soon as the morning came, we played video games all night long. As soon as the morning came, I left.
Interesting. Okay, and so I think if we want to touch on one other point, I guess being the only Muslim family in Arkansas, you never really had a community to go to. And I mean, I guess in Chicago you do, as you had mentioned. So, like, talk about, because I know a lot of us, we complain about our communities, complain about every little thing.
Yeah.
Talk about why maybe we shouldn't do that, and how you're taking advantage of having a community now.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. Being the only Muslim in town, growing up, a lot, and I grew up with the same set of friends from kindergarten all the way up to the day we graduated, and and they were very familiar with Islam, and I really have to commend my parents for that. They never let me. They really stressed my religion and my culture. They never let me lose my faith. So a lot of my friends, they would see me and they would say, "Oh, here's this guy. He prays 5 times a day. He, once a month he kind of disappears during lunchtime and he doesn't eat lunch. So he's fasting." So they were very familiar with Islam by the time we graduated, and to the point which Well, I was in 10th grade. We went to a new high school.
Mm-hmm.
There was a teacher there in 10th grade, and she goes, we're going to start off by. It was a world history class, and she said we're going to
Right.
start off by talking about Islam. She goes, this is the most evil religion that's out there, and for 50 minutes she just
Wow.
bashed Islam, and my friends would just kind of turn around and just stare at me, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
say something, and I said, wait. And at the end of the class, she came up to me and she said, um, can I ask you a question? I said, yeah. She goes, what religion are you? I said, I'm Muslim. Islam is my religion. And she goes, ooh, sorry. I said, no, because you just stayed up there for 50 minutes and you just spewed lies. And that's not really what Islam is. And the next day I
Mm-hmm.
brought her a book of Islam. And the next class after that, when we met, she
Right.
literally apologized to the
Mm-hmm.
class. And she said, I never knew how beautiful Islam was. And she referenced the book and she said, thank you to Imran for teaching me what the real Islam is.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Wow.
I go back and I see some of my friends, and I've been far removed from that
Mm-hmm.
community, living here in Chicago. And, now a lot of my friends, my childhood friends, they're priests and they're sheriffs and physicians of that town. They're more of the leadership role. And,
Mm-hmm.
one of my friends, I saw him for the first time after like maybe 20 years. I ran into him last year and he said, I just want to let you know that everything that they say on the news about Muslims and Islam, I know it's fake because I know you. And I know that you were not what they said. And I've known you for my whole life pretty much. And so, and my friends were very involved with the church youth groups down there in Arkansas. And
Right.
when I used to see them, I used to be very envious. And I made a promise to my parents. I said that, man, if I ever go to a city where we have a community, where we have a center, I want to really give back to the community. I want to give them what I never had. And so when I moved
Mm-hmm.
here to Chicago, the first thing I noticed is that when I went to the Islamic Education Center, I noticed that the youth were all very separated. They were all sitting in groups and bunches. And so that's when I decided I wanted to be a youth director, and I wanted to break these barriers and bring everybody together. And from my experience growing up, and I saw the church youth groups of the South, and the Christians, they did fun things like putting together basketball tournaments and
Mm-hmm.
sleepovers and all night swimming events and movie movie nights and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
bowling nights, and I kind of translated that here and brought that culture here, and it really was very successful and in the response of our youth. So that's what I did. For about 7 years, I was their youth director, and now I've kind of transitioned more into a Sunday school teacher role. So I'm still wanting to stay connected to the community and still giving back to the youth.
I have one question, actually, back to your profession for a second
Okay,
before we conclude, because we have a few minutes left.
sure.
So I know for you, I guess you didn't really take any pharmacy courses in undergrad to introduce you to the field.
Right.
What if people listening to this show are thinking about maybe they're interested in this field? How can they learn more? Like, can they take a specific course? And what would like the path be?
Good question. I would tell them that first of all, look within your community. I almost guarantee that everybody has a pharmacist in their community, and don't be shy to ask them to shadow them. I mean, if this is what you want to do for the rest of your life, the one thing that you want to do is you want to shadow and see if that is this, to confirm that this is what you want, and to solidify that decision. The universities, they have pre-pharmacy advisors. Build a relationship with them. If this is something that you're interested in, they can guide you. They've guided many students to to pharmacy school. They can guide you as well. The basic courses, I would tell that the biologies, the chemistries, the anatomy and physiology, those are the basic tenets of the foundations of going to pharmacy school. And so, but depends on the pharmacy school. If they would like somebody with a undergraduate degree, then you look into biology, look into chemistry, look into math. All of these undergraduate degrees they accept.
Interesting. Okay, thanks. So thank you so much for your advice. And just one final question: what is your final piece of advice to our listeners?
Oh, that's a good
Can be
question.
anything.
What I would tell people that know that you're more than just a person. More than know that your life purpose. I get this question a lot from the youth, that I don't know what the purpose of my life is, and what I tell them is that you're a gift. Know that you're a gift, and that when the people look at you, they look at you more than just what your name is. They look at you as an ambassador of Islam, and that you represent the way that you present Islam. That might be their only lasting image of how a Muslim is.
Mm-hmm.
So I would tell you is that, like, for example, with me, many of those people that I grew up with, now they know that how a Muslim is, and they don't buy into whatever the media propaganda is or what they read on social media, because of the example that I was for them. So make sure that you represent Islam well, and know that might be their only opportunity, that person's opportunity to see who a Muslim is. So that's probably the one advice I would share with everyone.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we're so happy to have your advice.
Well, thank you for spending time with me.
You're so very welcome. Okay, join us for our next show. Next week, Saturday at 3 p.m., we have an IT panel with Brother Sayed Abirizvi and Brother Faisal Abbas. They're going to discuss some of the roles surging during the pandemic era and how to prepare for them. And that's going to be co-hosted by myself and Sister Fatima Al-Sayed. So we hope to see you there. And thank you so much for tuning in today. We have just one final slide to share with you. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.